through Mr. Van Steenhouse relative to work that's been done on the north end on Mr. Hardy's, but then also had him go through and look at additional properties that we feel are in need of attention. Give you a rundown in his report relative to the status of each of those, and then we'll be going forward with working with those property owners and trying to make some improvements on their properties. You know, the direction that I gave him was specifically to look and see if there are specific properties that we need to be pursuing some type of action against because of the current condition that they have, or is it simply needing to provide some attention to it for painting and determining if the property owner was willing to do that. If there are specific things that with some minor help, you know, we had a facade project in the past that could have taken advantage of, are there needs that they have that if they had the means available to them, would they be able to consider making an improvement? So starting that dialogue with some of those property owners. But obviously what started all this was our actions that we were taking considering Mr. Hardy's property on North Federal. He has taken care of 2 of the 3 areas that were of the biggest concern relative to the appearance of that property, and has a plan for the 3rd one. Obviously, in my opinion, we'd like to see it move forward a little sooner. Mr. Hardy may be able to address that here today, but that was probably the biggest thing that we saw. And getting it into a position, we had obviously discussions with Mr. Nielsen relative to what our legal rights and authority would be relative to pursuit of any type of demolition activity relative to the Hardy property, and whether or not we could do it. Limited ability based on the work that he has done at this point. I speak for Mr. Nielsen, but that is what we're seeing based on his analysis with the work that's been done. So I guess I'll stop there.
Just a couple things. I have tried again. There are 2 property owners that at the time I'd written this that I hadn't been able to get a hold of. I've tried again. I've left messages, so I still haven't been able to make direct contact with those 2 property owners. The other thing I just wanted to mention quickly is you probably heard about a petition that's going around, and that it all kind of happened concurrently without anybody knowing. And we started working on this, and then I found out a few days later that a petition had been started. So it just kind of happened at the same time. This action didn't start the petition, nor did the petition start this work that we're doing in the department. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Folks, I assume you read everything. Questions, comments, clarifications? Mr. King.
First, before we get into specific with these properties, as I've read through this a few times, section 411, or the definition of nuisance and just different things that it takes for a property to reach that distinction. Have we taken any time to look at, because really, and it says here, we really don't have any tools currently if the owner is unwilling to make the repairs if they do not constitute a nuisance. Other communities that have ordinances, language with a little more teeth, I know we've done things, nuisance property, disorderly premise, that's more going towards the tenants and citations within those, but specifically just structurally sound, physical appearance, other communities that have more teeth in ordinances that we could potentially be looking at down the road. And I'm kind of getting the cart in front of the horse here, but that's where my mind went first, is reading through this.
Yeah, I haven't had time to research any particular ordinances of any other communities, and generally when we do that, we start with what I consider to be our peer communities, similar sized cities in Iowa like Ottumwa, Burlington, Clinton, Marshalltown, Fort Dodge. I haven't had time really to look at how those communities approach the particular problems, although I'm not aware, just anecdotally and working with planners in other communities, that they have significantly different ordinances. We do have, that section that you cited does give us some ability to go after what, properties that are obviously deteriorated from the exterior. Maybe not structurally unsound, but, you know, we do have the ability to go after them. Talking with the code enforcement people in my office, that attempts to implement these requirements in the past have not always been successful, that judges have been sympathetic with the property owner, and we've not been able to get beyond that point. So, you know, we'd have to work with the city attorney really closely to see, you know, how we might be able to apply that particular section in the context of these particular properties to see if we could move forward with that. Things change over time, you know, and hopefully, you know, we might be successful if we're able to implement one of these ordinance requirements in these particular properties. In any case, we are going to try to work with them on an individual basis to see if there isn't some way that we could entice them to do something, always holding over them, you know, the possibility that we might have to use a legal means to get something done.
My, specifically to 1335 and 1337, my specific concern is doing the minimum amount and this catching headlines for a few weeks, and then we go back to status quo, not really seeing any true changes on our North Federal corridor. And I think to make this successful, it truly has to be public and private working together to really make some changes. Which brings me to, obviously there's three parts to this: the windows enclosure on the east end, and the front facade and the awning and windows. But interior, and I don't know how conversing here, but the interior of the building, how confident are we that once these improvements are made, that a commercial tenant, this is something that is truly going to move forward once they step inside and bring a business into that area? And I don't know how we're running this right now, but is that okay to ask Mr. Hardy that?
Yeah, well, he's there for this subject, so.
Let me get up here where I can see each of you better. That is a very good question, Alex. And as you know, the former Alley Cats building I acquired last year. And I have been working to get tenants in the downstairs. The upstairs, in your notes, I think, has said the white tag for the FAR apartments has been removed. We've repaired those. I don't have tenants in there yet because I'm really looking for a tenant downstairs, and it may be that some of the staff for people downstairs would live upstairs. What I'm specifically concerned about is if there were a restaurant or band or something that is still in operation at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, how that would impact residential tenants upstairs. Now, if the tenants upstairs work downstairs, that's perfect, and that's what I'm looking for. I have had conversations with about 5 different restaurateurs. My primary goal is to get what used to be Ponderosa Pizza. Some of you will remember where that was. That was at the restaurant clear at the north edge of Alley Cats. Would love to see a restaurant there. And I've had some other conversations about utilizing the other space in the Alley Cats building. But at this moment, I don't have anybody on the dotted line. Some people are financially, actually most people are financially less qualified to be able to go in, but I have had a conversation with a couple of people that I think could be successful there.
Changing gears here real quick. Success we've had in the past, all items 4 through 7 under that section of the code, 4-1-1. Is that going to be a long, tedious, drawn-out process like it's written in here, or is that something that we feel could make a difference to not only those 2 properties, but the others that are listed here to actually, because I feel driving by there on numerous occasions, looking just on the exterior of some of these buildings up there that are listed in the different property owners, that a lot of those would meet items 4 through 7 currently. Do we perceive we would have any success going down that route, or would that be a long, drawn-out court issue?
Well, I mean, it has the potential to be, because if they are unwilling to comply, then the next step would be issuing a citation, which means that we will be, before a magistrate. So, then we'll have our attorneys involved in putting a case together and prosecuting that case. So I'd have to leave it to Randy to tell you more about the details of how that would work and what what potential pitfalls and issues are in that part of the process. But having that in our back pocket may be useful, because obviously people don't want to wind up dealing with the court if they can avoid it. Our initial efforts are going to be based on trying to work with these people individually and to try to find some way to help them comply. And if we're successful with that, then that's great. But if not, then we'll work with them to try to see if there's a legal means that we can compel them to comply with the requirements.
I'll stop for a while and just have other thoughts.
Mr. Trump?
I think in the most general sense, one of the problems we have is most of us and probably most people in the community have a pretty good idea what we don't want in the north end, but we've never really defined what we do want in the north end. And it's probably going to take a partnership with the neighborhood association to define what we want in the north end, and then work to figure out what we need to do to create the market environment that will help drive that vision. We've never really done that. What we've done is complain about what we have, with no real end goal to what we want. It seems to me like this might be a nice opportunity for our development department to work with the north end and start working on what is the vision, and then what steps do we need to do to try to achieve that vision. And then the specific Hardy properties that we've been dealing with notwithstanding, in the most general sense, I agree with your recommendation for the properties at 1011, 1410, 1425. And I think we need to strive to be consistent in the way we deal with the issues on the north end. And I mean consistent with the way we tackle those, so that we're consistent with the way we've been with Mr. Hardy. And what I mean by that is I think we need a time frame by which we will have contacted all the owners. And then we need to establish expectations with all the owners in a time frame by which we expect them to have a plan back, which is similar to what we did with Mr. Hardy. And then deliverables, executables with delivery dates on plans from those property owners for each of the individual properties. And I think if we fall off schedule at any one of those 3 steps, then it's time to start pursuing individual properties per section 4-1-1, the way you've referenced. And then that leaves 1450 and 1454, and as I've read through the packet, I also agree with your recommendation that we start pursuing demolition of those now. Those would appear to be on saving, and it would appear that even if, and it's mostly a financial thing, it just doesn't make business sense. And so I guess the long and short of it is I agree with the recommendations that are in the packet, but we need to put deliverables on them and expectations.
Well, and that could go to helping us with the issue of what we want in that area. Because if the owner doesn't have the financial means to take care of the demolition, from the procedure that Randy said, if there were residential structures there, we can gain ownership. We can do the demolition and gain ownership. If we own a nice sized lot on a corner next to already a nice, a good retail business in the Family Dollar, we then have a next piece property that we can determine, okay, this is the type of development we'd like to see. We own the property, we could work with someone in order to make it happen.
You've also brought up very good points regarding sidewalks, and again, in the most general sense, sidewalks in front of a business are the responsibility of the business. But I would consider a carrot in this case, and that any property owner that works in, generated a plan, and executes the plan, and keeps things on schedule, meets their commitments, I would suggest the city may want to consider, as a reward, taking care of the sidewalks in front of the business. I think that's mutually beneficial. I'm done, yeah.
Make it. Ms. Moranis?
I'm curious, I'm sitting here trying to remember all the charrettes that we've done in this community, and we've done a lot of planning for years. If we've ever had one specifically for the North End. Jack, do you remember if we've done anything that's? Do you remember any charrettes or anything that we did for the North End?
Yes, but it was pretty general at the time. It wasn't specific, but it was, there were several good suggestions that came out of that. And it was having to do with revitalizing the North End to make it once again a destination and a viable place.
Great.
Do you recall when that was?
Oh.
What, 2 years ago?
I think it's been longer than that.
Longer than that?
I believe so. I believe so.
But it's been some time ago before that has been discussed, but I think it would be nice to do that.
I agree with Councilman Torquist that I think that's probably our best next step, is to pull the stakeholders in the North End together and do some planning and some visioning about what we can do to make that a place to go and a place to be. I like some of the buildings. I love the look of this building. I'm sure that's the one, 1450. I think that's an incredibly attractive building, and I think if somebody had enough money to put it back together, that it could be a very attractive addition to the community up there. And I think there's some others that could be done the same. And I'm looking back at some of the experience that I've had with the downtown. If you get an organization together that really wants to just pick one, maybe the North End Association wants to purchase this building, and through tax credits or investments in some of the banks, or maybe some investor in the community wants to invest in it, that they'd be willing to do something and take that building back to what it was originally. It's a very attractive building if you look at it. I mean, it's got the heading at the top. I don't particularly like the one on the North End there, but I think there's some potential there. And there's some other buildings that aren't necessarily strikingly beautiful, but they're still very serviceable. And I just think there's some opportunities there for some people that we overlooked maybe. But I'm very much in favor of getting the groups together to do some talking about what we can do to make it work.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan?
And I think that that's a great idea. That's what I was kind of wondering, maybe if we could have some sort of a town meeting for the North End, because I know the North End Partnership has purchased homes before and renovated them and turned around and sold them for profit. So if that is something that they might be willing to undertake, they must have some pretty talented people up there. I don't know quite the addresses here, but the Mountain Clothier ones, is that even being habitated right now?
That's that one.
But is that even being habitated right now?
No.
So no business in there?
No, the owner told me that occasionally, I mean, there's still stock and trade inside that Mount Clothiers, and he says occasionally the proprietor will open it up, but it's hit and miss.
Yeah, because I don't know how, if it's got some good bones in there for somebody to go in and try to do something with before we would condemn it or whatever. But one of the questions is the one that Zips was in, isn't that one, the 1011 North Federal, wasn't that one condemned before?
Not that I'm aware of.
I recall a prior tenant where the electricity and everything was shut off because I thought it was condemned.
I'll look into that. I mean, no one on our staff had mentioned that they thought that had happened before. I talked to the building official about it, and he told me about the permit that they asked for about a year ago to put some drywall on the inside, but nothing about anything else, or that it had ever been condemned.
Okay, well, I'm all about looking to try to, if there's any renovations that would be possible, you know, for these, otherwise, you know, I do think the North End is looking for them to come down. This petition that's going around, is that for just us to do something, or is a group wanting to come in and look at purchasing some?
It's generally a show of support for, you know, the city to move. They just want to see their buildings improved. From, I think that was it 9th Street to 15th. I think it said on there.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, and then just one question, Mr. Hardy, is that, the old Alley Cats, is that move-in ready for a tenant, or is there still needing to be some renovations in
The
that?
apartments upstairs are nearly move-in ready. There's, we've got to put appliances in, but I've got security lights in place in the hallways. Floors have been re-sanded and varnished. Drywall, there was a ton of drywall repairs from, I see a nod.
And that's in the downstairs
No,
then?
that's upstairs.
Is the downstairs move-in ready though
It,
for a tenant?
it's pretty close. It needs some cleaning. The kitchen is mostly intact. Assuming that the previous owner took the automatic dishwasher that was in there and took a 3-basin sink, but it wouldn't take an awful lot to put it back together as a code-ready commercial kitchen. If I may suggest something, I'm liking what the council is saying about getting the partners and stakeholders together. Wonderful, wonderful idea. And I'd like at this meeting, and I see there's lots of media here, as I was putting together my plan for March 1st, I was working with Tom Hurd at Spatial Designs, and Jack Lehman was there. And this is really important. Between Jack and Tom, they came up with the moniker, the Historic North Village. And please get that down in your notes. The Historic North Village. What a positive difference that makes when somebody is talking about going to the historic North Village instead of the North End. It's huge. I've mentioned it to 2 or 3 people and their eyes light up. There's just an entire different frame of mind in the historic North Village. And I give Jack and Tom credit for that. I didn't think of it, but I like it. The other thing is, and I'm not wanting to be negative about this, but I own other residential properties near the historic North Village. And so many times I have somebody that will come and say, I'm looking for a house, but I've been told to stay away from the North End. That is so wrong. There are fabulous people that live on the north side of Mason City, just as there are on east, south, and west. 40 years ago, when I came to Mason City, the North End maybe had more of a deserved reputation than it has today. 40 years ago, the Decker plant was there and the smells. Both cement plants did not have the air infiltration, the dust capturing equipment that they have today. Now one plant is closed, the smells are gone. It's an entirely different feel on the north side of Mason City. And we have a role in changing the perception of the residential area around the historic North Village. It's huge. I may be losing a train of thought. I'll try to get it back. I occasionally suffer from Alzheimer's because I'm not old enough to have Alzheimer's. But, sometimes that perception is given by some in our realty department. I know what I was going to say. What I was going to say is what the council has done with the nuisance property ordinance has helped very much to change the perception. It hasn't changed the perception, but it has changed the reality of the residential area in North Mason City. It's changed it. I think we still have officers here. They may be able to tell you whether there are any more or less calls for service in the area around North Mason City than there are in any other part of the town. The ordinance has really succeeded. Thank you. Even though when there's something new, we may not be totally for it because we don't understand it, but now that it's in place, you've done a good job. You've done a good job.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing. And then, Mr. Mancinos, what are we doing to try to contact these property owners? Are you just trying to call them? Have you tried to make personal visits to these?
Yeah, I've been to the sites. The problem is that the deed name in the county records is the same address as the buildings, and the buildings are vacant. So I mean, we can send a certified letter to there. We don't have any way of hoping that they'll ever get picked up because nobody actually lives there or frequents these buildings. So we're working the back channels. Mr. True works with the old Roberts Furnace. I mean, I've left messages. I think eventually we're going to make contact. I do know people who know him personally, and so somehow we're gonna make that contact. So I feel confident.
And I do know where he lives too if you need. So.
Okay. So we'll keep pursuing this.
Okay.
That's a front door. I think.
Yeah. Anyway, so okay, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, and I agree with everything you just said. I think the problem's bigger than just the properties in North Federal. I've tried real hard to look at this from a property of a resident in the North End, or from the perspective of somebody that lives in the North End. And I can understand why the buildings are an issue and how that contributes to the perception of the North End. And I've also tried to look at this from the perspective of somebody that owns one of those buildings. It seems to me it would be very difficult to justify putting capital into one of those buildings if you didn't have some kind of assurance that there was going to be a tenant. You need a return on your investment. And so we've got the two fighting each other. And that's where, if we come back to some of your comments, if we can figure out what our vision is for the North End, and then start working on those perceptions and create an environment where people want to be on the North End. I think it's going to start with the businesses on Federal. And I think if we can clean up the way North Federal looks, that will sink into the neighborhood on both sides of Federal and start working really to change perceptions and just the general feeling people have when they're up there. And I do really like the historic North Village thing. That's
Isn't
clever.
that neat?
Yeah.
It is. It's huge.
Mr. Kim? I thought you were ready. No.
I have no real comments. I think everybody's kind of said what they said, and I like the idea of changing perception, but at the same time, this is a gamble. I mean, we're talking about capitalism here, is how can I turn a buck on a bad situation, but yeah, we need that tax revenue from all those properties, and so it is a one heck of a cycle. Where do we jump in? And I guess I don't have a clear vision of what I think it would take, so I need people's opinions who, from day to day, risk that, know what it might take. So I'm willing to listen and go. I kind of agree with what we have in here, but this is kind of what Councilman Kuhn said. This could all be done, and we don't fix the problem. This truly is a Band-Aid up there. It's how do we truly change a culture. That is $1 million question, and I don't have the answer. So that's just all what I'm trying to listen here is how do we ultimately change the culture here.
I tried to get in fact, I tried to get the Italian restaurant that's in the old Burger King on South Federal. I said, you need more space. You need, yes, he said, I do need more space. I said, well, I've got more space in the historic North Village. And you know what, he nearly yelled at me. No, he said, we're not going to the north end of Mason City. I want to go west. West is where the action is. That's what, and this is somebody that has just been in this community for, what, less than 2 years? That's what we're fighting. Every day, we get calls from somebody wanting a one-bedroom apartment, a two-bedroom apartment, or a house. And Scott, you're exactly right. You make an investment where there's going to be a return on the investment. And right now, for us, that's in residential. And I have committed, and I had a 3-step plan, and I've completed 2 steps, and I will complete the 3rd step on the facade on the 2 buildings on Federal. And I think you're going to like, when I'm done, I think you'll like what it's going to look like. I think you'll appreciate that.
Ms. Rickey.
I agree with what you said. There's a lot of good people on the north end, village, whatever you want to call it now, which it's kind of cool. I kind of like that myself too. I spent a lot of time up there, ball diamonds and everything else, and know a lot of people in that part of town. And there's a lot of good families, you know, people, and there's bad people in all parts of this town. So I think it has kind of got a bad rap. But I think the thing that I look at, representing this area and living here my whole life, is people have seen this, like you said, you've been here for 40 years. It really hasn't changed in 40 years. It's been that way the whole time, and I think people are to the point we need to find some sort of change to improve this area. Me, I'm in favor of the 1450, 1454. If we gotta move forward and knock that down, I'm fine with that. I know that, I've been in that building, I know that building, it's in bad shape. But if we can find, I'm all about solutions too. If we can find solutions to fix up some of these properties, make them viable properties, and create a North End village, I'm fine with that too. Now, isn't some of the work that we've done with that stretch of town, as far as we've changed some TIF options and different things where we can work with the property owners?
I know, that's kind of what I was trying to get at. I'm not, you know, some people said, well, they tried the facade, but, you know, we don't do it anymore. I'm not ready to give up on that, because if there are truly property owners that would stand up, as you're alluding to, we should be working with them rather than saying, well, you had your chance, because that doesn't solve it.
Right, and that's where, like we've done that whole quarter, I think 2 or 3 blocks on both sides of Federal, if I remember right, where we could maybe do some TIF, tax abatements, or whatever we gotta do, like we do on any other development agreement, to work with these property owners to get them to a place where it is a viable property, and then we can make that part of town a little nicer appearance, so to speak. I'm all for that, and I think that's the direction, but kind of like Councilman Tornquist said, we know what we don't want to see, but we haven't come up with any solutions on what we want in the future, and I think that's a great observation. I'd like to see us move to try and find solutions, rather, I don't necessarily want to tear them down, but if they're unstructurally safe and then disrepair, I don't think we move forward in that direction. But I'm okay with the recommendations, and even with your properties, Mr. Hardy. I know I went and visited with you once and seen some of the work that you do. I think part of the concern and fear sometimes that maybe me as a council member, I can't speak for my colleagues, but as far as residences, it's not so much the work that you do, it's the timeliness and the completion time that it takes to get it done sometimes. And I do like the idea of Councilman Tornquist that if we're gonna work with them, then we gotta have time constraints and work towards getting that done in a timely fashion, instead of doing a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Next thing you know, another 5 to 10 years has gone down the road and we really haven't completed anything.
Just one final comment I'd make is North End improvements, whether it's the North Federal Corridor, it's obviously a major goal of all of ours that we put in our council goals, and the fact of the matter is we can only stretch ourselves so thin, but just to staff, this is something I think we really need to focus on. And it's something I think everyone would agree, that, and just like the Reinvestment Act process, to make it truly work and not just be something we talk about, it needs to be the private end and the public working together, and I think the North End Partnership is a perfect vehicle to bring a group together and start that conversation of what do we want there, how do we do it, how do we work together to make this happen, because, and put things on the table like, I'm not saying everyone would agree with it, but a special improvement district, you know. If people really want to go to those links to make improvements, that put all the options on the table and really put some focus on this area in the next weeks and months moving forward. So I agree with the recommendations here, and hopefully come June 30th, all those are in place, and appreciate the work here, Mr. Hardy, and that's all I have on this one.
All right.
Got it. We'll make some things happen. We got a lot of summer, a lot of time left. I think we could get a lot of things set up. Still time to work.
Well,